Hello, valued patrons. Today I'm here to talk to you about this paper, which is by Dr. Sennikov, an ichnologist from Russia. It's about Plantigrady in what he calls Segnosaurians, Therizinosaurs. This paper has a lot of quirks, and I want to talk about it. I suspect it of being bad science, or at least not particularly good science, which means I don't want to put it in an episode or in a proper episode, but I can't, there's a lot in here. There is a trackway, which is this one, this trackway in Tajikistan, which is the type of Macropodosaurus, which is a animal with 4 toes walking bipedally, and it was discovered in the 60s, and it was almost immediately disputed whether this was a dinosaur because from the look of the tracks, it appears to be walking plantigrade, and we know that dinosaurs just, as a rule, did not walk plantigrade. They walked digitigrade. That's where if this was a foot, digitigrade, you're up on your toe bones, whereas plantigrade, you're using the whole foot. Now, at the time that those trackways were described, we didn't know what a therizinosaur was. We didn't find the first Segnosaurs until 79. Or, well, actually, we had Therizinosaurus, but we didn't know that it was a Segnosaur at the time. We didn't put together, like, we had found some hind limb material from Therizinosaurus in 73, but it wasn't until the 80s that anybody put all of this together and said, oh, Therizinosaurus is a Segnosaur, therefore Segnosaurs are Therizinosaurs. But then, in 2006, Sennikov lined up the known foot material from Erlikosaurus and Therizinosaurus with the Macropodosaurus tracks, and was able to say, look, these look like these are from this animal. And that, at least, is credible. Since he made that claim, more Macropodosaurus tracks have been found elsewhere in the world. We have some from Poland, from Western North America, from Morocco, and at least the North American tracks are a lot clearer than the ones from Tajikistan, even though they're smaller in size. There's another ichnotaxon called Otozoum, which is usually interpreted as a basal sauropodomorph walking bipedally, because those animals also had 4 toes for walking on. But first of all, those animals are found in late Triassic, early Jurassic rock, which is too early for Therizinosaurs, and they have much less of a heel than these tracks do. There's also other tetradactyl tracks from the Cretaceous, but those look more like, this was pointed out in 2013 by Gerlinski et al., those look more like an animal like this, like an Oviraptorosaur, because they have 3 forward-facing bird-like toes and then 1 dew claw, even though I guess you can't call it a dew claw because it's for walking on. They have convincingly argued, in my opinion, that those tetradactyl tracks from Utah and Alaska are from an Oviraptorosaur. Now you might say, Stephen, if this is all so reasonable, why are you talking about this paper? Well, there's some problems. Like, first of all, throughout, Sennikov refers to these animals as Segnosaurs. I don't know why. He acknowledges that they're now called Therizinosaurs, but I guess he just didn't feel like going through his whole paper and replacing Segnosaur with Therizinosaur. I don't know, maybe this is an old man thing, because it's only fairly recently that Therizinosauria became the accepted term, but it's weird. It's a weird thing to do. He also takes the sloth analogy really far. Like, he's not the first author to compare Therizinosaurs to giant ground sloths. Like, that, I think I made that comparison too. Where he goes off the rails, in my opinion, is he's saying that because they resemble giant ground sloths morphologically or ecologically, they must also resemble them evolutionarily. That they have ancestors who are tree-dwelling, that they have, like, which appears to mostly be based on the idea that Deinonychus could climb trees, which, I mean, aside from the roughness of this graphic, like, that's not an unreasonable thing to suppose, but Deinonychus is not a good proxy for whatever the ancestors of Therizinosaurs looked like anyway. Like, it's not impossible that the ancestors of Therizinosaurs were arboreal, but we can't say that they were because we don't have the ancestors of Therizinosaurs. He includes a survey of hind limb proportions in dinosaurs to try to explain why he thinks Therizinosaurs are an outlier as far as Plantigrady. But he doesn't include any known plantigrade bipedal archosaurs in his dataset. You know, we have what used to be called Rauisuchians. I don't know if that's a valid group anymore. But you would think you would want to check your data against animals related to dinosaurs that walked the way you're arguing these dinosaurs walked. And like, you could argue that in a Maniraptor that has secondarily developed Plantigrady, it need not actually resemble what crocodile relatives were doing because their ankles are very different anyway, and probably a bunch of other stuff I'm not even thinking of. But at least include it in your data set for comparison. He doesn't consider the way that the bones of the foot would articulate. Like in Nothronychus, there's these deep flexor pits on the distal ends of the metatarsals, and admittedly that doesn't prove anything because, you know, if you watch a crocodile high walking, is what it's called, their toes flex like 90 degrees. But we'd expect the ankle bones of Therizinosaurs to show adaptations for bearing weight and for habitually standing in that way, but as far as I can tell, their ankle bones just look like normal dinosaur ankle bones, except that one of the synapomorphies for the group is actually a reduced astragalus, or at least the body of the astragalus. So the main ankle bone is actually reduced at the point where it's bearing weight. Then again, the medial process of the astragalus is larger, so maybe it's just a shift of priorities there. I don't know. He makes a somewhat convincing argument, in my opinion, that if they were standing like this, having a plantigrade foot actually provides leverage to the front of the animal. So, you know, Therizinosaurs, as this toy demonstrates, are very front-heavy animals, and we think that they would habitually be standing much more upright, much more vertically oriented bodies on these guys. But that's still front-heavy, and it makes a certain amount of sense that having a foot poking out would provide, you know, balance. It would allow the animal not to fall forward as it uses its arms and neck. I don't know if any of that is borne out by, like, ligament attachments in the leg or any of the other morphological things we would look for to corroborate that, but it is an interesting idea. Less reasonable, in my opinion, is his idea that walking plantigrade increases the weight-bearing surface of the foot. So, in dinosaurs, and I assume in most animals, the long bones bear weight better, bear stresses better longitudinally. So you have animals like, it's more clear in this toy, but if it was walking along with the foot closer to columnar, closer to vertical, that's going to be able to bear more stress than if it's walking along like this, because now all of the force is being placed just at the ankle joint, at the heel. But the idea that they would have to distribute their weight over the whole foot is not completely unreasonable, but he doesn't consider whether they might have had an elephant-like pad under the foot. Authors in 2018 looked at this in sauropods, and as far as I can tell, they only looked at quadrupedal sauropods, so a lot of this might not necessarily apply to bipedal animals. But Janelle et al. In 2018 distinguished between skeletal plantigrady, where the bones themselves are all basically horizontal, and functional plantigrady, where the skeleton is still digitigrade, but because there's a fleshy pad under the heel, the weight of the animal is being borne by the entire foot. But again, the animals they were considering had much shorter foot bones than Therizinosaurs did anyway. I alluded to this earlier with the arboreal Deinonychus idea, but Sennikov supposes that there must be these long ghost lineages of Therizinosaurs stretching back to the Triassic, and he doesn't have phylogenetic justification for this. He just supposes that if they were going to revert to Plantigrady, it had to be fairly early in their lineage. This is very different from the usual topology of the group. Sennikov suggests that there's one lineage of Therizinosaurs leading to animals like Falcarius that are small and gracile, and one leading to animals like Nothronychus that are large and robust. That's not how we reconstruct the group. It's more of a stems and branches arrangement. He barely gives any consideration to the idea that this might be a crocodilian, because that's the first thing I thought of. In 2020, some authors from Korea described Batrachopus? Batrachopus? I don't know how you say it, but it's these guys. The trackway had previously been thought to represent a bipedal pterosaur, but they determined that no, this is probably a previously unknown bipedal crocodilian in the Cretaceous. And it's really big. It was exciting news at the time. Sennikov got wind of this information, but instead decided, no, Batrachopus might actually be a Therizinosaur. Maybe? I don't know. They do kind of resemble one another, but like, if that's the case, why aren't we considering that maybe Macropodosaurus is also a crocodile if they look similar? He also doesn't consider, in 2021 we had a paper come out about some trackways that seemed to show the entire foot being walked on, but it turns out it was actually a case of the front of the foot penetrated really deep into the substrate, and that left like an elongated heel print just because of the foot sinking in. I don't know if that, I'm not an ichnologist, so I don't know if that applies to all instances of Macropodosaurus, because the trackways from North America at least seem to be much clearer. Like the ones from Tajikistan are very large and messy, whereas in America we have some pretty fine-grained detailing, especially on the heel part. So should we restore Therizinosaurus walking plantigrade? I mean, I hate to say it, but maybe this toy has the right idea? Maybe having a elongated heel pad underneath their short foot is actually the way to go? I'm interested to see this story develop, but as you may have noticed, there's a lot that's unclear and possibly bunk here. So I can't give you a definitive answer right now. But I want to thank you guys for continuing to support the show and for watching our first bonus episode. And I will see you next time.